Albums that will continue to delight you because you cannot understand it first pass. There's a lot going on here, and Matt has prepared for us a 1 hour video from his home and other members of the band, and interspersed with the video is there's some conversation about what the motivation is and what the album's all about and what playing's all about. So without further ado, we're going to jump in and we're going to join a Zoom call and chat with Matt. Are we there?
Yes.
Matt Steckler, Matty Stecks, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this, for taking some time to spend with the audience and share your musical vision. We also have,
Thanks so much, Matt.
You got, we have in the room another room, the collective room, the digital room, Mr. Fabian Brown from Rope It Up, who always manages to come up with some of the best questions for musicians. So I couldn't do this without you, bro. Good to see you.
Thanks, Lewis.
All right. So before we play this video, the format is going to be the video is 1 hour and 7 minutes long. So I'm going to stop it at about 20 minutes for those of you who are watching, and we're going to come back on and chat. We're going to take questions that you've posted in the feed from the live stream and pass them on to Matt. I want to urge everybody, including us, right now to go to Facebook, the Rope It Up Records Facebook, which is facebook.com/ropeitope99, and share this stream. Turn your friends onto it. And when we're all set, and I get the word from engineer and from Matty Stecks that we're sharing, then we'll proceed. Are we good?
I have shared, yes.
Good. Sharing is a good social thing to do these days. Talking thing was good. Were we all set? Terrific. Mr. Brown, I'm going to let you lead off. I want to talk about your impression. I want you to talk about your impression and ask Mr. Steckler whatever's on. I know as a musician, you've got something to say.
Well, thanks, Lewis. I really appreciate it. And then everyone on live stream world, nice to be here remotely. That is, you know, Matty, I've had a quite amount of time to listen and absorb myself with the music and the piece that you put together. And I got to say, from saxophonist to saxophonist, love your tone. Your tone is very distinct and it's very recognizable. You know, it speaks to you, but that's not to say that the compositions are amazing as well. And you know, I know we were chatting a little bit prior to the call starting today, and maybe you can help me and give the audience a little bit of context on the creation of this project. I think the story behind how this whole thing got created is a fantastic story in and of itself, above and beyond the result and the product of the music. Can you share with us just a little bit about, you know, the journey that you have to creating this album?
Yeah. Well, thanks, first of all, for the compliments. I really appreciate that. And just to get into it as quickly as I can, I'm originally from the Northeast US, but I've spent the last 3 years teaching at a conservatory, a university here in actually central Canada, Manitoba province. So it's Brandon University School of Music. And when I got here 3 years ago, there were some people I knew that were on the faculty that I had known from my days at New England Conservatory in Boston when I was in grad school. And I also knew that there was a pretty talented crop of other faculty as well as students. And I think that's just the way it is in these smaller communities. You know, the world is becoming a smaller place, and because young people have access to the world of music at their fingertips, as you well know, they're able to absorb the world's music much more quickly. And it's not necessarily a truism anymore to say that, you know, you have to only go to New York City, for example, to really be a good musician. So I saw that was the case right away when I arrived here, and I wanted to harness the particularities of the talent pool in this community. And that meant that some genre hopping was possible, because there's, well, I guess, let me rewind for a second. They were going to commission me to put together some music for kind of a concert meant to introduce myself to the community. And that was done through the Brandon Chamber Players back in January 2019. So 6 months ahead of that, I just started writing, you know, a bucket ton of music. And the concert series had a music theme to it. So I knew I wanted to write music, have portion of the concert be dedicated towards playing live to picture. And so I wrote, I rescored a Charlie Chaplin short, and that movie is called Musical Tramps. So I did that, and that's like an 11-minute piece that's now on the record. And then I added 4 tunes, I guess you could say, in the pop and R&B soul realm. Only because I had access to some great singers, you know, my wife included, but also some students here. And I always had a desire to sing myself on a recording that I put out, but I hadn't really had the opportunity up till now. Some straight ahead jazz stuff, and then also this like research stuff. And this is the really connective tissue and why it became a double album and not just, you know, the usual. The university gave me a generous research council grant to just continue some work I'd been doing for my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, that had a lot to do with assigning professionals to do field recordings based on a theme. And the theme I gave them was a title that my son came up with called Long Time Ago Rumble, which was based on some Who Would Win books that he was reading. And I had them field record these things and write in their journals, and then we turned those into guided improvs. And then with those recordings, I sort of put some electroacoustic overlays and made it into kind of collage pieces. And that became sort of the connective tissue between the other main pieces of the album. And that's really why you hear all the different sound colors that you hear. You hear strings, you hear clarinets, you hear, you know, great band playing and great sort of post-production types of electronic sounds happening as well. And also just speech. Speech plays a big role in many parts of that album as well.
That's quite fascinating. So if I'm understanding correctly, you came up there with some preconceived ideas and some material for you to work out, but it sounds like the real work started developing once you started meeting this pool of talent in this community. Tell me the process of writing music. I mean, that's a feat in itself, because you haven't played with these musicians before, you haven't collaborated on any real degree. You know, how do you go through the process of vetting a musician, you know, and the quality of what they're bringing to the table, and then how do you go about writing for that? I know that's a real big question, but maybe the first part, how do you go about vetting out the musician and the talent pool?
Well, I quickly knew the hand I was dealt, because I think in the first week of the fall semester, my getting here, I participated in a concert that was kind of like actually really like a classical music concert. So I actually got to know some of the string and woodwind faculty that way here. So I kind of knew that there were possibilities to branch out of the usual, just like Matty Stecks jazz quintet kind of recording or whatever. And then my first week of ensemble teaching, I knew some students that were very capable singers and bass players and that kind of thing. And so I knew that I was going to be able to fill in the blanks whoever wasn't like out there as a professional. Actually, some of these students have professional experience themselves, and they just went back to school later. So that was the vetting part. As far as the writing part, it's much easier for me to write once I know the tools I have in my toolbox. I just know the possibilities, you know, and there's nothing like a deadline. I think I'm paraphrasing something that Duke Ellington alluded to many years ago. It's just like deadlines make the moment happen, right? And he was always writing for the occasion, whether it's some kind of residency at the Cotton Club or whatnot. So I think the danger is always having too many choices, but when you're actually like pigeonholed into like, well, this is what I can do, and by exclusion, the things you can't do. I have a much easier time with that kind of thing than just sitting alone in a dark room wondering where am I going to start.
No, that's great. That's great context. I really appreciate that. And maybe just one more thought before we get into some music. So the diversity on the album, there's a range there, right? Like you said, it's not just a straight ahead jazz album, based on the talent that you had access to. With the film scoring and everything like that, with the Charlie Chaplin track, what is your process? I need to dig a little bit deeper on the process of writing these materials, because it goes from something jazz, something R&B, to something not even in between. So tell me a little bit more about when you're getting the musicians in the room, when you're writing and arranging for these things. What's your motivation? What's the inspiration you're drawing from? Who are the legends? Who are the greats that you're pulling the magic from?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a multi-part. Great question. Well, I'll speak to Chaplin first, because that is a different process, I think.
Sure.
I had a little grad school experience and then a little professional experience after that, writing Scored a Picture, because NYU has a good film scoring program, and I was there for a bit. And, you really have to just sit there and see, almost with the sound off, of if there was any prior soundtrack, and just see what the picture, what other stories the picture can tell. And you let your imagination kind of run wild, but you don't write the music for its own sake. I mean, it really has to be a marriage, which is different from the other music on that record. But it is Chaplin, so, the need and call for a sense of humor is timeless, regardless of whether it's modern humor or very retro humor. Like, you still need to write music that can harness that. And I have a little bit of an iconoclastic, like, rebel streak. So I knew I wanted improv to play some role. It doesn't always have to be through composed all the time. And, I take inspiration from, like, I don't know, I always thought Henry Threadgill's music sounds very cinematic, even if it's not written specifically for picture. I know that he knows how to, like, integrate these notated and these improvisational elements and interweave them very capably and communicate a story, a narrative that way. So, and I have some experience with the software, so I know how to set it up so I can have the picture running and be able to, type in things to go along and test ideas out and have different sync points. If there's like a slapstick moment where, like, someone's getting doused with water, I know I have a certain amount of time leading up to that moment where I can have a big cymbal crash or whatever. That's kind of predictable, but the things you can do before and after can be very unpredictable and very, in the ear of the beholder, in terms of the composer's intent and their decision making.
I love that.
Fascinating. So I think it's time to let people see some of this. And when we come back, we'll take a break in about 18 minutes into this. And when we come back, Matt, I'd love to hear about the making of this video, but let's cue it up now.
Like a coin flip, a game of chance, with all goes up comes down. I was nearing insanity, but then with you I found a warm caress right over my dress. Well, there you go again. Deep in my mind we're intertwined. I could never pretend to ever keep my cool with how you make me feel. You take me back to school, you show me something real. Try Tried to make heads or tails when I thought I'd fail. You were there for me. And still I can't believe all the good you see, how you care for me. Every choice made has got its risk, forever tempting fate. Do I let you into my heart, or is it much too late? You take me to the brink from what I thought I knew. I wanna take this drink. I know you got the brew. Tried to make heads or tails when I thought I'd fail. You were there for me. And still I can't believe all the good you see, how you care for me. Come a little closer, babe, and show me the way. I'm falling ever deeper every time you call my name. Ties another quarter in that fountain of mine. Boy, I want you so bad. Can't you see love's on the line? Tried to make heads or tails when I thought I'd fail. You were there for me. And still I can't believe all the good you see, how you care for me. Tried to make heads or tails when I thought I'd fail. You were there for me. And still I can't believe all the good you see, how you care for me. Tried to heads or tails when I thought I felt you were there for me. And still I can't believe all the good you said. I cared for me.
So, hey everybody, my name is Matty Stecks, christened name Matthew Steckler, and I'm here up in Brandon, Canada, doing my first ever online concert for you, and this is under the auspices or through the partnership with Rope-A-Dope Records, and they've been so kind as to help me release my latest recording project, which is called, it's a double album called Long Time Ago Rumble, and the project is called Matty Stecks and Musical Tramps. Today with me I have the incredibly talented guitarist Diogo Peixoto, who is here in Canada to study. He's a grad student at Brandon University, but he has a long track record as a professional musician, both in Brazil and very quickly up here he's been making a name for himself as well. And we're a part of Canada called Manitoba, by the way. How you doing, Diogo? Good to see you.
Hey man, yeah. Hey guys, man. Well, nice to see you. Thanks for inviting me to do this. It's a pleasure to play this repertoire. Like I said before, the album is amazing. You know, you should check it out, definitely. And I'm not on the album, and I'm not being paid to say that, so you can trust me a little bit. And yeah, man, it's my pleasure. It's an honor to play this. Yeah.
Thank you for the unbiased endorsement. Yeah, I got to know Diogo a little bit after the start of this recording project, but I'm really glad that I did, and it's a testament to his talent that he learned these tunes that we're playing for you today so quickly. So you get a little bit of a different taste of how flexible the music can be in the hands of different musicians. So yeah, we're going to play a little bit more for you right now, and then we'll get to talk about different things later, including how the project came to be and got put together. So I'm going to play, I think, the last track off the album, and it's a double album. It's a long album, so it's kind of ironic, but we're going to start from the end and maybe work our way back toward the beginning. And this track is called Somersault of the Earth. So here we go. All right, we're back. So a little bit about the record that I'm promoting, Long Time Ago Rumble. It is a double album project, and the reason it became so long is because there was a concert that kind of showcased my, introduced Matt to the community type of concert that was funded in part by Manitoba Film and Music, who also ended up funding the record, as well as a generous grant, a research grant from Brandon University, and production help from Brandon Chamber Players. So those three organizations basically in tandem help make the infrastructure for this possible. And the research piece is really the important one because I have a doctorate in music composition from several years back, and I wanted to continue some of the same things I was studying during my dissertation, which had a lot to do with embodiment in experiencing music as a professional performer, and for me specifically having to do with composition and particularly composing collectively with other professional musicians. So half of the album is actually dedicated towards kind of a group improvisation that's informed by targeted field recordings, journal entries that provide some substance in their choices behind the journal, behind the field recordings that they chose, kind of justifying those, and also some musique concrète techniques, some electroacoustic collage techniques in post-production afterwards, and that kind of makes up generally half the record. And there are all these like segues and interludes between, I would say, like the main composed pieces that I just composed myself, that made that into sort of kind of half the double album is kind of abstract, and the other half is a little bit more split evenly between things like straight ahead jazz, more like pop music realm, R&B, soul kinds of things. And then there was a film score, an original film score that I, for a Charlie Chaplin short called Musical Tramps, that the band name took after. So all those things ended up in my live concert. It was a fairly long concert, but not as long as the album. I kind of just introduced some of those ideas for the first time then. So that's the gist of it. So Long Time Ago Rumble, it's available on Rope-A-Dope Records, through Bandcamp, through all the streaming services, all the ones you know about. My website is mattystecks.com, and I have Jogo here, who's been doing a great job learning all these pieces to perform for you today. And Jogo, do you want to play another, and then we'll talk a little bit about your professional life and your influences after that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah, let's do it.
Let's try that.
Marks and Matt Steckler, aka Matty Stecks. We're excited. What you just listened to and we're watching, is a creation that he was able to put together from his album Matty Stecks and the Musical Tramps, the album titled Long Time Ago Rumble. And I'm here with Matty. We're just kind of chatting it up for you guys who are just joining us here now. Matty, I would really love to really dive deep into your musical influences. Again, for those guys who are just joining us, it's quite interesting because of the diversity that you hear in the album. Maybe you can share with the good people here that are watching online just a little bit about some of your influences growing up, and maybe some of the influences that helped actually shape the composition piece of this album.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I mean, every artist at some point gets this question, usually many times, and sometimes the answer to that question changes over time.
Sure.
But I can tell you, I can rewind as far back as like when I started my first band, my first project, which was kind of in the college years, and at that time it was a project with 4 saxes in the group and a rhythm section. And I wanted it to I just had this vision of it being a blend of World Sax Quartet and Charles Mingus. Like, for some reason, that was what I was hearing.
I love
of
it.
course, the sound, yeah, I know, right? Who knew? But the sounds that then ensued from just like stream of consciousness writing went in all other directions as well. Like the instrumentation was one thing, and yes, there's a sax quartet in there, and certainly the attitude, which is more like Charles Mingus, that was another thing. But the compositions themselves were definitely drawing on these other sort of like more implicit or nuanced influences, and a lot of it crossed over into like pop and rock and R&B and jam band shit, and you know, just
and then
like
we'll talk a little bit about your
sometimes
your
neoclassical
professional life
things
and
or
your
world
influences
music
after that.
Yeah,
things,
sure.
you know,
Okay,
like
sure.
little
Let's try
bits
that.
and pieces, just like a rhythm I may have heard in Bali, just hearing a gamelan and some of the polyphonic, you know, counterpoint that's happening in some of those, you know, those pieces would just pop up into something that I was writing. So, you know, it was very postmodern in that sense.
I can dig it.
And then some other projects I got like drew heavily on some of the people I was surrounding myself with, you know. So on one project I had Lonnie Plaxico, the bassist, on the record, and I don't know, I wrote things that I knew that would like capitalize on his like amazingness, you know, in a way. And there's not really a name for the sound of that, but the pieces reflected putting people like that in different directions. It was almost like a lab experiment. It's like, you know, let's get that ball rolling. And this music here is kind of the same thing. It's almost like me at this point in my career, I'm finding more value in the people I surround myself with that may or may not be famous or like a household name per se, but they have their own voice regardless. Like there's so many people that are doing like great things. And I think that's part of the democratization of the internet, like ever since the old industry model changed. Yep. You don't have those like selling out big stadium type of legacy acts anymore, but what you do have is like people just totally doing what they want to do. Like, you know, like more and more. So when I write thinking about them and their sound and what they would sound like on something that I would write, you know. And it's this constant dialogue between what they can do and what I'm hearing, you know.
Absolutely fascinating. You know, that kind of brings me to thinking about today. You know, I know as a musician, you know, it's important to, you know, pay homage to all the classics and all the greats and all the people who have paved the way for us to get to, you know, where music is today, culturally, artistically, and technically, and sound and vibe, and you know, bringing all these different influences and cultures together. You know, let's fast forward to today, Matty. Who's on your radar, who's on the scene that you're listening to, you know, who are you keeping your finger on the pulse on? You know, when you're not composing and when you're not doing your thing, you know, where are you retreating to, and who are you listening to kind of just get you to the spot where you want to be?
Oh man. Well, I think the effect of this will be down the road, but you know, I've been trying to just check out some Robodope artists lately. It's like, you know, we're packing a move right now, and that's kind of running right now. And I've just been kind of really pleased. I don't know if I can name every single person that impressed me, but I'll start with some friends of mine, you know, like who are on the label. Like E. Scott Lindner has an incredible record out right now. That's from a perspective of an engineer who can assemble these great musicians and have a concept behind the record. I just thought that was incredible. Jared Sims is my good friend, and he does stuff with Brian Thomas, but he also has his own independent releases. And I don't know, he just crushes it. He was in my old band, Dead Cat Bounce, so I'm always checking out what Jared is up to. But also people I don't know, you know, that are on the record. I was blown away by that new single that oh man, well, Sean Martin, I just heard a track from his, but there's also a new single for the Black Lives Matter effort that someone put out. It has vocals on it. Who is the guy again? Christian
Scott.
Oh, Campbell.
Gordon Campbell.
I was so digging on that, and you know, it's probably because I've been delving a little into pop lately and looking for influences from that direction, you know. So it's of course I listen to classic players all the time, especially people who like died recently, which is unfortunate because you want to honor them more when they're alive. But Lee Konitz, like, he was fresh in my mind obviously recently, you know. So there's just so much, you know, and I try to come back to old things every once in a while as well.
Yeah, we can definitely have a hang over some whiskey and some music anytime that you want, Matty. That's a great feel. Lewis, I'm not sure if we're ready, or if I have a couple.
Yeah, we've got a little more time.
got a little more time. Excellent, excellent. You know, Matty, you mentioned different rope-a-dope artists on the on the label that you're listening to, but one of the things that popped out to me when I was looking at this album and listening, and even in the video that we just watched, you're a bit of a multi-instrumentalist, right? So saxophone is probably your go-to, but you're behind the keys as well. So what that brings up for me, I'm always trying to understand and get information on how compositions, how an individual approaches their composition, and their writing style. So for someone who their main instrument is saxophone, a monophonic instrument, do you find yourself reaching for other instruments to create compositions, or maybe share a little bit about what that process is for you when you're creating and when you're writing?
Yeah, well, actually, this ties into kind of my research interests. This idea of embodied composition. I really want to like tactily feel the actual sound source before I'm thinking abstractly about pen and paper. And I think picking up random instruments is just always been part of my process, but I was able to kind of like put a label to that process more recently. And I think it also helps to with my history as a teacher at different grade levels. I've actually taught K-12 and college and grad school and pre-K even. It's crazy, adult ed. And I think that kind of like takes some of the pressure off to be kind of like a master, because I use the piano as a teaching tool to teach oral skills, for instance, or for teaching theory, or be able to accompany a sax student when they're going through some recital repertoire or something like that. I just got by osmosis better at performing on the piano just by working with students. And I did grow up, that was my first instrument back in like when I was 8 years old. I started at piano, so it never really left me, but of course my focus changed, and you can never be like the best at every instrument, but I do hear, like, I'm a band guy. I don't consider myself someone like who's I don't know if I would stand on a corner necessarily and have endless hours of interesting material to play on a saxophone, but I do think about what the rest of the band is doing often, and so if I'm dabbling on these other instruments, I kind of have a sense for what I want their role to be, and different ways of knowing how much control I can have over that, and also knowing when to let go is also very important, and allowing the other player to really make some of the decisions in that. So, but you don't know what that is until you've tried to play the instrument yourself.
That's really interesting. Man, yeah, I could imagine playing solo saxophone on the street corner for endless hours is probably not the most ideal type of situation any horn player
Who
wants
needs to hear?
Say it again. Say it again.
Like, who needs to hear that, really? I'm not sure.
It's right. Yeah, until you get that one phone call. Hey, man, can you play your saxophone for 4 hours here at a birthday party? Like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, that's really great and interesting stuff. I mean, what are some of the next things that are, on the agenda? And I know that's listen, COVID-19, I know that's a really hard question to answer in times like this. I mean, I'm going to assume that, if things were, normal, you would be on the road and you would be performing out and, and taking this album out on the road. Well, I guess maybe not so much with the type of people that you have on the album. What are some of the next steps for you musically coming out of COVID-19?
Yeah, well, it's a crazy time, and even crazier for me because I'm finishing up my teaching job up here. So we're actually in a few days moving back to the States. I'll be based out of New York State, but I'll be looking to sort of reconnect with some of my old contacts in the Northeast at that point. Okay. That said, we did have a Western Canada tour here that was canceled, and I do regret that. But I'm kind of trying not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm trying to see if I can maybe find a way to reschedule that further down the line and see what might be possible there. In the meantime, we decided to give this online concert thing a go. So there's this one, and I'll have another one coming up in a little bit, and thinking in terms of, sparser instrumentation, more scaled down, so duets, trios, and also thinking about maybe further down the road, more like in the house concert vibe, so that live music can come back, but in a more, I don't know. I thought that was the way things were going anyway before COVID, actually, because you're getting kind of like a smaller niche, but a more organically and more dedicated audience with some of those house concerts. And I even had house concerts booked on the tour that didn't happen prior to this. So I think if it's live music is going to come back, it's got to come back there first, and then we see about the clubs from there and larger venues after that.
I'm going to agree with that, and I want to talk about that for a second, and mostly specifically to the audience, to people who are watching. We took a lot for granted, and when we see this happen, you start to think about getting back to normal and how everything's going to work. But you're seeing all the little details and the logistics of touring that are just suddenly not possible. I mean, just yesterday they said, people from the United States would have to be quarantined for 14 days if they travel to Europe, right? Specific countries in Europe. You can't really travel around if you're going to get quarantined, right? That's going to be a problem. So there's no certainty in that, let alone just being on an airplane or just being on the road. I mean, so many of us are at our homes and we rely on that for safety and security at this point to be able to quarantine. You're on the road, right? You're at risk. So it's gonna be a really challenging situation for musicians, I think, for some time. And I want to mention to the audience that what we're trying to do here and what Matty has put together is a way to bring the music to you, and also in certainly not in a personal way, right? Because they're not in person, but certainly in a more intimate way. I mean, if you went out to see this band, you'd get the live performance, but nobody's going to get to hang with you and ask these kind of questions and hear your answers, right? So there's this hybrid thing developing of presenting online performance and also communicating with musicians that has not been available in the or hasn't been really done much in the past. So what we here at the label are urging people to do is to support. And I've heard so many great stories about people donating, buying tickets for online performances. And I want to urge people that are listening to this to not just share this performance, and we're going to get back to that video in a minute. We had to do some minor edits or major edits. But I believe you have, first off, Matty, you have a PayPal address that people can, you have that set up that people can.
Yes, I do.
And you are contributing some of that to a particular cause. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, all of it actually. So
Okay.
In both cases, my handle is Matty Stecks, one word. So paypal.me/Matty Stecks, or just go to PayPal and find me as Matty Stecks, or same thing with Venmo at Matty Stecks. So whatever people want to contribute, it's up to them. I chose one of the BlackLivesMatter.com partners, the Black Lions for Just Immigration. So I think that just struck me as an organization that was doing a lot of good things in a lot of different places at once. So I wanted to just be able to, do my part. Yeah, and I don't think it has to end at the end of the concert. I can continue forwarding donations for a little while after this as well.
That's great. That's great. It's amazing to see so many musicians doing it at a time when their livelihood has been challenged. So, hats off for that, and I encourage people to do that. But I do feel like we're going to, everyone's going to get a lot better at presenting online performance. And I think that I know that people are also hurting because of the economy. But those who do have the means are saving a lot of money on their live music budget right now. So this is the way to get to it. I heard a statistic that it was from the UK that 20% of musicians were pretty much going to call it quits. as a result of this. So, you know, that's just, to me, that's tragic, because it's such a noble profession, and such a valuable thing for us to be able to have music on a regular basis from creative people. So that's my 2 cents, and then I'm gonna, Fabian, if you've got one more question, I think we're getting closer to this edit and to resume the show.
That's great. And thank you for that, Lewis, and the context. You know, Matty, where can people go to, in addition to going to your PayPal, where can people go to hear some of your music, past and present and current? What's the best place that you want to plug? I'm going to assume Bandcamp is one link. Where else should people be
Yeah.
visiting?
Well, there's my website, which links to everything else, mattystecks.com. It's the easiest thing to communicate verbally. And I'm on all the social channels. I have YouTube stuff up, and yeah, content needs to continually be added daily, but it is in progress. Yeah.
I love it. So for all of you guys who are listening on the line, please, the support for independent musicians has never been greater before. I mean, obviously you're hearing statistics like 20% of musicians who are going to throw in the towel. And, I think what that really, really means is that 20% of the population of musicians can't sustain being a professional musician solely. They have to find other means of creating income. So the more we can work together and keeping great quality independent music out there, the better. I think we're ready to go back towards the second portion of the video. Is that correct?
We are. We're gonna run this straight through, and we'll see y'all at the end.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Who's been doing a great job learning all these pieces to perform for you today. And Joga, do you want to play another, and then we'll talk a little bit about your professional life and your influences after that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah, let's do it.
Let's try that.
We have been down this road off and on again. Seems like every episode is written in the wind. Call a far-off new place home, brother left behind. Put your needs above my own, fear my state of mind. Still here for you, babe, while losing myself. Can we stay close, yet drift apart? Alone hearts cry for help. Go on, keep love sublime, as I feel my way forward this time. We were young when this was new. I now know you so well. Music is your mistress who cloaks me in its spell. Play your organ how I long, pull out all your stops, press rewind on this old song before we close up shop. Still here for you, babe, while losing myself. Can we stay close, yet drift apart? Alone hearts cry for help. Go on, keep love sublime, as I feel my way forward this time. drift apart. Alone hearts cry for help. Go on, keep love sublime. Go on, keep love sublime. As I feel my way forward, feel my way forward, feel my way forward this time.
Okay, we're back. Yeah, this is moving along fairly quickly, but it's been a lot of fun. So I want to turn some of the questioning, if you don't mind, being on the hot seat, to you, Jogo. You've come from a very long way to be here, and I guess my first question to you is like, why Canada, or specifically, why even Prairie Canada, Manitoba?
Yeah. Well, it's a hard question. You know, I get that a lot. Well, I think the first thing is that you know, I got to play a lot of music down there in Brazil, and you know, a lot of Brazilian music. We have an amazing music scene there. You know, we got to play some stuff together, and you know, all that you guys know about samba, bossa nova, and choro, and all those genres, very cool. But I was always involved with jazz and kind of wanted to explore a little bit more, you know, and kind of learn that closer to the source, you know, because when you get the information down there, most times you're getting the information like third hand, fourth hand, you know, and it's kind of, you know, so I kind of wanted to get that information, that approach, learn jazz from people who people who had jazz as an upbringing, you know, that were like inside the community of jazz and playing. So I just started, you know, looking for places, and my first option was like the United States and Canada. And after a lot of research and, you know, looking at the budget as well, because that was an important thing, and looking at like the amazing country Canada is, and like, you know, all the things, like I kind of decided that I was gonna take my first shot in Canada, and then if that didn't work out, I would try in other places, even Europe, and then it worked out, and so I ended up here with, you know, you and all the faculty here. So that was kind of the, you know, long story short, I came here.
Awesome. Who are your main influences, man? I mean, I hear so many things in your playing, and it's hard to like pinpoint any one thing. But I mean, yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I've been always kind of a rebel. As a teenager, I was a rebel. So I started as a classical guitar player, right? And then I fell in love with rock. So I don't play classical anymore. Now I play rock. So I played a lot of rock. Then I studied a little bit of flamenco guitar, you know, that Spanish style of playing. Then I started playing like a lot of heavy metal and also Brazilian music. So my influences are like, it's a very hybrid blend of a lot of things. So I remember as a teenager, I would get interested in like one band, and I would just listen to that band like over and over again. So I remember, for example, Iron Maiden was a huge influence. Metallica was a huge influence. Dream Theater was a huge influence. But when I got into jazz, my first one was Miles Davis. Like that was, okay, huge influence. Then George Benson was another one. Then I had a Spyro Gyra and Chick Corea phase, you know. So it's really hard to tell like what are my main influences, because I feel that somehow we don't have control of like what actually comes up when you're playing, right? So you listen to a lot of stuff, you play a lot of stuff, but what really comes to your playing, like it's really hard to control. So I always say that like liking one thing is different from wanting to sound like that, right? So I guess I have a lot of influences that don't show up in my playing, and I have a lot of things that show up in my playing that I wouldn't call influences. But I think the biggest thing that is clear is that I played a lot of music in Brazil. Like I played like heavy metal bands, just like, you know, wedding bands. I played a lot of Brazilian music, a lot of jazz. I played a lot of big bands as well. in that case, like not a jazz, but more like Brazilian instrumental music, but very modern, you know. So I guess that kind of, you know, it's all that blend just kind of.
And alongside a lot of those, what you might call mainstream influences, you have one of the unique distinctions of having performed with Hermeto Pascoal recently, in fact.
Yeah, that's another thing. But you know, that's the thing. Like when I see that as one more experience, right? Which is amazing, of course. But you know, all those things of like playing with famous people or people who are not that famous but are as great as those guys, right? And playing with people from the mainstream of like the pop music, right, as well. I learned a lot from pop music. So I think I always looked at those experiences as like as valuable. You know, I don't see those experiences like, oh, this one is more valuable. All of those experiences, like, yeah, that's amazing. Like today playing here, right? So yeah, I guess it's hard. It's hard to tell. You know, whenever people ask me, I don't even feel comfortable in saying that I'm a jazz guitar player or even a Brazilian music player. You know, because I think it's just like music, right? I play music, and sometimes I play jazz. Yeah, sometimes I play rock. Yeah, sometimes I play Brazilian music. But after all, we try to play music.
Super. Well, I want to hear more of you right now. So should we do another one for them?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's go for that. All right. Well, what a whirlwind of an hour or so concert this has been, and chance to talk with you, Jogo, and with you out there, the audience. I'm really curious to hear what you all think. Please don't hesitate. I don't bite. Jogo doesn't bite to ask any questions whatsoever. I'm available through the live chat. But also afterward, you can just shoot me a message through my website or the other usual channels. So yeah, you heard a fair mix of different things that we did this afternoon. I've collaborated with a lot of great musicians. I probably should mention them all while I have you here. The core band on the album included Keith Price, guitar player, Eric Platz, who's faculty here in percussion, Matt Kazicki, a very advanced recent BU grad, other great faculty at BU such as Leanne Zacharias on cello and Kathy Wood on clarinet, Jeff Presloff, who is a jazz piano fixture up here in Manitoba, is on a couple selections. Some really great singers who, including my wife, Megan Demarest, recent BU grads Hannah Fern and Lenya Wilkes, exquisite vocals from them. And did I forget anybody? I play a bunch of different instruments, but I think that about covers it. So I guess in parting, I will have one more selection as we say goodbye. But you know, it's not lost on Jogo or me that it's hard to sometimes find music's importance in the world that we live in today, all the complications that we're facing in the world today. I think it's tempting to say that, oh, we don't necessarily need the arts, or it's just not a priority for us right now. But from what I'm hearing from a lot of you, and when I check in with other artists who are responding to their fans, I'm hearing a lot of people saying, well, no, music is important. So I'm hoping in our little way that we could have given you a note of positivity today, and just express our gratitude to the really hard and serious work that our first responders have been doing all around the world, and also all the calls for social justice that are out there in the protests in the street right now, Black Lives Matter, etc. If there's anything that we can do, I just want to be part of that movement. Jogo, do you have anything to add that you'd like to say?
Yeah, no, man, I think you said everything. I think, I think maybe the biggest challenge right now is like trying to, stay together and help each other regardless the disagreements, So if each one of us can do the best we can to help, and your best might be different from my best and your best, but what counts is the intention, right? So if we can stay together and help each other, I think it's valid. So I think that's the message.
Awesome. Yeah, totally agree with that. So thanks again for tuning in for the concert. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think. Jogo, thank you. What a great job, as always, my man. And we'll just play one more for you. And sort of let the whole proceedings fade out naturally and organically, if that's possible. So thanks again. We'll catch you soon. Take care.
There's a light that shines on you, Siddhartha. Well, there's a light that shines on you in the afternoon as you walk the earth. There's a light that shines on you, Siddhartha. With love for our people, all is one and one is all. Siddhartha, Siddhartha, Siddhartha. Wisdom should not be imparted. The young Samana spoke. The teachings of the enlightened ones will only leave you broke. So he set out for the city to chase a dual truth. His den of sin corrupted him and the innocence of you. Renounce yourself, ignite a pleasure therein. You'll come upon love's treasure. The path is but a spiral. Seek and you shall not find. my message going viral, because no gold can clear your mind. He listened to the river at the ferryman's behest. A traveler's the worldly goes forever melting crest. Its secret lies in the present, no other time exists. The oneness that unites the world, both high and low, persists. Renounce and select him, seek leisure, the path he takes is his to measure the path. It's but a spiral, seek and you shall not find. My message is going viral, because no gold can clear your mind.
All right, we are back. That was absolutely wonderful. I hope you enjoyed it. Mr. Fabian Brown.
Thank you, Lewis. And you know what? And a special thanks to you, Matty. I really appreciate you spending this time here with us, getting to know you personally, getting to know your music, and just sharing some good words with you, guys. For you guys who are listening and stayed along for this time, please support independent musicians. Please support Mr. Matty Stecks. You can visit him at paypal.me/Matty Stecks, or you can just search Matty Stecks on Vimeo. 100% of any contribution will be donated to a charity that he's supporting via Black Lives Matter. And again, just a special thanks for your support in its entirety for all Rope-A-Dope music, all independent musicians. Lewis, I really appreciate the time that you have me here in my home while you were in the while you were on the sofa.
A spot on your own sofa.
A spot on my own sofa, man. I really appreciate that. Maddie, before we go out, is there anything that you want to share with the audience? Maybe something something they don't know about you, or something that you want to leave them with.
Well, I wanted to actually extend personally to you my gratitude for Rope-A-Dope's contribution in helping get the word out on this recording project, which is probably in a lot of ways the most personal and dear to me to date of things I've done. And to check out everyone on your roster. I've been doing the same myself lately, and it's really incredible the breadth of artistry that they're taking a chance on. I don't even call it taking a chance. I just think your business model is very flexible and interesting. And so anyway, thank you guys. Thank you to my immediate community here that helped me create the record. Tailored recording. Jordan Jackie was an amazing engineer. He made it sound pristine. And I already named all the artists who were on the project in the video that I created. And especially Jogo Peixoto, who wasn't on the studio album, but he did this duet video with me. I hope you guys will look out for him, because he is something special as a player, as a composer, and a well guy too. And yes, you already mentioned the donations, so please support. I'll try to do my part to the extent that I can.
Excellent. Matty Stecks, Musical Tramps. Check the album on Bandcamp and on ropeadope.com. I want to remind everybody that this recording and the wonderful performance video that Matty had put together and we aired today will live on YouTube and Facebook and can be shared on a regular basis. Those who can donate and support the charity that Matty has chosen, we appreciate you and thank you. Though if you can't and you like what you see, just share. Tell your friends, tell your friends, tell your friends. That's the way this works. All right, Matty Stecks, thanks for your commitment. Thank you for bringing beautiful music to the world at a time when the world needs it absolutely the most. We will chat with you soon. Fabian Brown, I like the camera angle, and I think you have a promising career in interviewing some sort of video podcast, and I hope you'll do it with us. All right. Thanks, Jensen. Thanks to everyone for